patients or subglutamine killing patients, even though these are at high risk. We had some pre-specified risk groups, and this is important because I'm going to show you some exploratory endpoints that if you want to be taken seriously with subgroups, you need to specify them in advance, because everyone who analyzes trials are going to look at them all sorts of ways and once in a while find something interesting and then presenting that. But we had our principal risk groups. We had the diabetes only, the cardiovascular disease only, and the combination. So overall there was this 1% absolute increase in risk, and you can see that if you had cardiovascular disease plus diabetes, there it was clearly visible. That's the second line. It's also, although insignificant in a subgroup in cardiovascular disease, remember those were only 16% of all the patients. And then it looks very neutral for the diabetes only. And then comes a very important question. Now, does this mean that it is not dangerous for the diabetes only? Now, if we want to prove that by unreasonable doubt, then we need to show that the result in diabetes and those with cardiovascular risk and those with both are actually statistically different. That's very difficult when the subgroups are small and there is no statistical difference. So we cannot say with statistical certainty that there are subgroups of scouts where there is less harm. But we can say we simply don't have the power to look for it. Now if we look at this absolute risk again, then we can look at in red, that's the diabetes only, and we have the primary outcome to the left, and you see that the two diabetes curves are superimposed on the bottom, and you have all-cause mortality where you actually see that in diabetes it is the placebo group that has the highest mortality for a while, but there is no statistical difference. And then intermediate, you have the cardiovascular risk, where you can clearly see the separate two black curves, and then the combined cardiovascular disease and diabetes, you also clearly see the separation to the left with the primary endpoint. But again, please be aware that we are talking about differences of roughly 1%. And for mortality to the right, also in subgroups, you don't see anything. This is just, again, because that's a very important group to consider when you're talking about the future of cyclosamine. Is diabetes only a risk factor? And, well, if it is, it's at least very small, and there's no indication of any increase in mortality. Now I'm going to show you some exploratory subgroups analysis. Because one of the questions you come up with, well, is it then beneficial to lose weight? Some of you will recall that there is a so-called obesity paradox in cardiovascular medicine, where a number of studies have very surprisingly shown that if you have heart failure, if you have hypertension, if you have cardiovascular disease, the fatter you are, the longer you live. Now there's so much bias that will lead to that. But given the result of SCOUT, we thought it very important to explore, is weight loss at all beneficial in this group? And this is sort of an introduction to this data, because it's important that if you want to study first weight loss and then events, then you have to use some of the trial to study weight loss and the rest of the trial to study events. So, looking at the top, we have weight change during lead-in of 2.5 kilo in the placebo and the subgroup. And if we start to baseline to 6 months, we had 2 in the placebo group again and 4 in the subglutamine. And if we go to 1 year, we have again slightly less than 2 in the placebo group and more than 4. So we had quite a difference there. But then should we start at month 2, 6 or month 12? Well, if you look at the primary outcome events, that's the middle block on this slide, you have 2.6% events in the first year in the placebo group and 2.8 in the sibutramine group. So nothing really appears to happen during the first year. For that reason, we find it meaningful to use the first year to study weight loss and the rest of the trial to study the consequences of weight loss. And this is also confirmed in cardiovascular death in the bottom, where you have 0.8% during the first year in both groups and substantially more later. So, we would also want to know what was the importance of disease severity. And what we have here is we defined, some could say arbitrarily, we said you have severe disease if you have myocardial infarction, stroke, congestive heart failure, peripheral vascular disease, or revascularization. You have a moderate severity if you just have history of angina, coronary artery disease, arrhythmia, transient ischemic attack, or valvular heart disease. And mild, none of the above. So using those three categories of severity and using the first year to study weight loss and the remainder of the trial, then you can construct models, these are Cox proportion hazard models, of 5-year outcome. And what you see is the weight change on the bottom, where you have 0, it's sort of in the middle, slightly to the right of it, and then you have weight loss as you go down, weight increase as you go up. And you see that everything indicates that that as the weight goes down, then the event rate goes down. That goes for the severe, the moderate, and the mild patients. So it does look reasonable to provide weight loss to these patients. And then you see, of course, as you would expect, that the sibutramine group lies higher. And what you actually, if you look at it, you can see that you will want like 6 kilos more weight loss on sibutramine to compensate for the excess risk. Remember, but only if you really want to give sibutramine for 5 days.